Good evening. This is a discourse on the silent voice, which is one of the paradoxes of yoga philosophy. This will be discourse number 3, paradox number 3 in my series of 10. I'm in South Austin, Texas. I'm James Exum. My yoga name is Sakshi, S-A-K-S-H-I, which means the witness. And I'm doing a continuation, as I said at the beginning, of discourses on yogic paradoxes. This one is entitled The Silent Voice. And I'm reading from my text, which I finished revising a few minutes ago. I've only gone through it once, so if I stumble here and there, please forgive an old man, because I am an older man. But I am a yogi, and my specialty is yoga philosophy and comparative studies of different religions, and more especially comparative studies in yogic readings, texts, manuscripts, and the great traditions of yoga. Okay, so I'll be reading from my text, and I'll also ad-lib as I go. I'll try to keep this under 30 minutes. Here we go. There exists a profound wisdom within the concept of the silent voice, a paradox that echoes through the ages in the yogic tradition, rooted in ancient Vedic scriptures and illuminated by the commentaries of great minds such as Śaṅkara, who is Adi Shankaracharya, and myself, who am a contemporary scholar. The silent voice signifies the ineffable, the transcendental, and the unstruck sound, which in Sanskrit is called Anāhata Nāda, which resides at the heart of yogic realization. Excuse me one second. I have Parkinson's, and it affects my voice box occasionally, so I have this tea, ginseng tea, to help me during these talks. So through the heart of yogic realization, and the unstruck sound known as Anāhata Nāda that resides at the heart of yogic realization. In this discourse, I will examine the silent voice through yogic historical quotes and sources, reflecting upon their meaning with insights from Śaṅkara, Adi Śaṅkara, who was the 8th century narrator and commentator on all the great works, most of the great works of yoga writings. And of course myself as a modern scholar on the subject. I've been at this almost 50 years, so it's okay to call myself a scholar, even though I have no university degree of any sort at all. The yogic understanding of silence. Now, this is a category, a subdivision of the paper I have written. I have a few of these, and they're topics that I break it down into different topics. The yogic understanding of silence. Silence is the means of accomplishing all, and that is taken from a writing called the Yoga Vasistha. In the tapestry of yoga philosophy, silence is not mere absence of sound, but a dynamic, ever-present force that underlines all manifestations. The yogic text often uses the metaphor of the soundless sound to refer to primordial vibration, Om, which can be spelled A-U-M or O-M, the origin and sensation of all phenomena. The Mandukya Upanishad states, Om ityita akarasham adam salam. Om is the imperishable word, and all this is its manifestation. In a way, they're saying there, in that Upanishad, they're equating the word Om with the Creator, with Brahman. And that sounds Again, a little bit paradoxical, but that's historically what has been written. But what lies beyond Om? The Upanishad continues, illuminating the final stage, Turiya, the fourth, which is not sound, not silence, not conscious, not unconscious, but a witness to all. A witness to all is also Sakshi, which is the name I gave my soul, which is my pen name, which is my hyphenated name under which I write my yogic papers and my yogic discourses, and all the work I do that's narrated is under that name, that joint name. Not sound, not silence, not conscious, not unconscious, but a witness to all. Thus, the silent voice is the substratum. Keep that in mind. The silent voice is the substratum. It is the canvas upon which all experience is painted. A bit heavy, but accurate. Śaṅkara, in his exhaustive commentary on the Mandukya Upanishads, writes, this is a quote, Turiya is not an object of the mind, it is the witness, the self, the silent substratum of all three states, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. This silent substratum is a voice experienced not through the ears, but through the very stillness of consciousness itself. This is not a kindergarten class you're attending in my YouTube video. This is advanced studies. This is advanced philosophy, yogic philosophy. The silent voice in Vedic and yogic texts. The Rig Veda extols the power of silence in the famous hymn, Tam Satyam Param Brahmana. Truth is realized in the supreme silence of the Brahman. Similarly, the Bhagavad Gita 16:19, which is chapter 6, verse 19, uses the metaphor of the lamp in a windless place, describing the stabilized mind in meditation as unwavering, fixed in the silent self. Krishna says to Arjuna, this is Lord Krishna, Arjuna, of course, is the prince, and this is from the Bhagavad Gita, when like a lamp in a windless place, the mind is steady, this is the state of yoga. Like a lamp in a windless place, the mind is steady. This is the state of yoga. That's one of the definitions of yoga, and one of the definitions of being within the state of yoga. You can be in the state of happiness, you can be in the state of sadness, you can be in the state of distress, you can be in the state of ecstasy, and you can also be in the state of yoga. And that definition is when, like a lamp in a windless place, the mind is steady. So steadiness of mind is another definition of yoga. There's dozens of definitions for yoga. Here the silent voice is the voice of inner stillness, the mind merged in the self. Now, when we say the self in yoga philosophy, and this is my specialty, yoga philosophy, when we say the self, we're talking about the soul, we're talking about the Atman, we're talking about the eternal being that occupies your body on loan from the Creator, came to your body in the first breath, leaves your body with the last breath, and it's also that little voice that whispers information to you but never interferes. It just merely comments. It's a commentator, so to speak. So the Yoga Sutras Patanjali emphasizes this as well. Yoga Chitta Vritta Narada. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of consciousness, which is another way of saying the fluctuations of thought. You have to be conscious to think, and thinking is a form of consciousness. It's an activity of consciousness. And that's from the Yoga Sutra, first chapter, second verse. When the modification of mind are silence, the practitioner abides in their true nature. The silent voice is therefore the pure awareness that shines forth when all distractions cease. Now, that's not a quote from Śaṅkara. That's a quote from myself. I wrote that. Śaṅkara's commentary, the unstruck sound, is the next subcategory. Adi Śaṅkara, 780 to 820 CE, the great exponent of Advaita Vedanta, highlights silence, which is also called mana, M-A-U-N-A, as the highest teaching. In his commentary on the Brahma Sutras and Upanishads, Śaṅkara repeatedly states that the truth of the self is beyond words and thoughts. It is realized in silence. The truth of the self is realized in silence. In the Kapha Upanishad, it is said, quote, the self cannot be known through study, nor through intellect, nor through much hearing. The self is known to those whom the self chooses. Such a one self reveals its own nature. The self is known to those whom the self chooses. Well, you've got that self in there. You've got that soul in there. But the soul communicates by whispering in a very soft voice, suggestions. But it doesn't have to choose you. It's the witness. And witnesses really cannot interfere. They're only there to pay attention and to take notes, so to speak, and to give testimony later if that's necessary, so to speak. Not necessarily like in a court of law, but they are the witness. Witnesses take mental notes, so to speak. It would have to be mental notes in their spirits. It would have to be, what's the word? I'm an old wordsmith, so sometimes it takes me a moment or two to grasp the exact word I want to use in the exact place and phrase. It would have to be the proper word, that's it. The self cannot be known through study, intellect, hearing. The self is known to those whom the self chooses. Such a one's self reveals its own nature. Śaṅkara's famous aphorism, mana vayaha prakratitita vara brahma tattvam. The highest truth is revealed in the teachings of silence, and it speaks directly to the silent voice. For Śaṅkara, all scriptural teachings culminate in the silent intuition of Brahman, the undivided reality. Well, Brahman cannot be divided. He can project, and through the power of Maya, he can seem as many things, but he's always only one. He's one without a second, is an old yoga phrase, an old yoga assertion. Commentary, Śaṅkara does not reject the scriptures of reasoning, but asserts their limitations. Words point the way, but the realization is wordless. The teacher's silence, as in the story of Dakshinamurti, is the purest transmission. The silent voice is the resonance of direct experience, not merely absence, but presence beyond articulation. There is a presence beyond articulation. There's certain things we cannot say because we're just humans and we can't think beyond a certain point. And if you can't think beyond a certain point, you cannot explain what that thing you're trying to think of beyond that certain point through articulation, the presence beyond articulation. Now, my perspective is that I explored the things that are encountered between yoga silence and the modern seeker. In my essay, that is from my essay, The Resonance of Silence in Yoga Practice. I wrote, quote, the silent voice is not a negation of sound, but its transcendence. In deep meditation, practitioners report a kind of listening that is not to external sound, but to the pulse of consciousness itself. Again, we go back to the phrase Anāhata Nāda, the unstruck sound described in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. I contrast Western notions of silence, often equated with emptiness or absence, with the yogic view, which is rich, vibrant, and full. The yogic view is rich, vibrant, and full. The Western view is equated with emptiness or absence if we're dealing with a silent situation. Now that's an incredible contrast, not only in words, but in philosophy. But you have to remember, yoga philosophy, yoga, the practicing of yoga, the invention of yoga, so to speak, the coming of yoga into the world, started anywhere from 6 to 8,000 BC, before the Common Era, BCE. That's 6,000 years before the Christ. You have to remember that the teachings of yoga are some of the very first written down pieces of philosophy. They're older than old, so to speak, or as they say in the Old South, older than dirt. I contrast Western notions of silence, as I just said, but for him who draws upon the experience of the advanced yogis, who instill in a sense of living presence with what some might call the inner voice. I draw upon the experience of advanced yogis, and I am an advanced yogi, who, in our stillness, sense of living presence, what some may call the inner voice. My insights illuminate the universal and cross-cultural appeal of the silent voice, while Śaṅkara's grounds silence in metaphysics. I invite all seekers to explore its psychological and experiential dimensions, experiential dimensions, for both the silent voice acts as an invitation to listen inwardly, to encounter the self, and to move beyond the limitations of language. The historical practices, yoga practices for the realization of the silent voice are as follows. These are bullet points. Yoga traditions have developed a variety of practices to attune oneself to the silent voice. Mana, which is sacred silence, practiced by sages and advanced yogis. Mana is not just physical silence, but mental quietude and an active listening to the stillness within. You can actively listen to silence. Yes. And that silence you're listening to is within. It's very rare you encounter silence in an external situation. Nāda yoga, the yoga of sound, practitioners focus on the subtle sounds within the body, progressing from gross to increasingly subtle sounds until they reach Anāhata Nāda, the unstruck eternal sound. Now what you have here is what I said earlier, but just in being redundant, in repetition. Dhyana meditation, all meditative traditions from Jnana Yoga's self-inquiry to Raja Yoga's concentration culminate in the experience of silence as the ground of being. Upanishadic contemplation, the direct method of neti, not this, described in the Upanishads, is an intellectual and intuitive process that strips away all that is not the self, leaving only the silent awareness. Neti is a very important phrase. Not this. If you can discern between what is important and what is not important, what is eternal and what is temporal, what is wisdom and what is foolishness, then you're on the proper path to rid yourself of all negative aspects through negation to reach the higher levels of yogic understanding, which is one of the paths to go. It's also one of the goals. The story of Dakshinamurti, the silent guru, is illustrative of this. According to tradition, Dakshinamurti imparted the highest knowledge to his disciples without uttering a word. Now that's almost paradoxical in itself. Well, it is paradoxical. His silence itself was the teaching. Śaṅkara, in his hymns and commentaries, venerates this mode of communication as the purest form. You go, well, that's almost impossible. How can you teach someone through silence? Well, if you had a father that grew up I had an older father when I was born. He was right at 50 years old when I was born. So that means he was born about 1901. I was born in 1950. He went through the Great Depression with my mother. They married just about the start of the Great Depression. So if you have a family like that, parents that are teaching you and raising you and influencing your intellect and your way of being in the world, then you will understand the power of silence. My father, by the time I got around to being able to communicate with him on a semi-logical level, first, second grade, somewhere in there, I would ask him a question, and sometimes he would just nod his head. Well, that was an affirmative. Sometimes he would shake his head. That was a negative. But that was silence. But you say, well, it wasn't because that was body language. Well, body language is not vocal. It's visual. So there is visual silence that is instructive. And perhaps this is how Dakshinamurti communicated with his students, with his followers, his seekers. Perhaps not. Perhaps he was elevated to the point, and they were receptive to the point, that they could speak without speaking and hear without hearing. Who knows? There are a lot of mystical things that are unknown in this world. We think we've gone beyond magic and the metaphysical, but we really haven't. Think about that for a while. If you walk into a room, say at a party, and you see someone across the way there, and they see you, and y'all give each other the eye, and you say to yourself, I don't like that fellow or that lady, and they return it with their eyes, I don't like that person, then you know you've met someone that you really will never ever be able to get along with, so why even start a conversation? So you just kind of maneuver around each other till the party's over, and you don't worry about them. Certain things are very important, and one of the things I'll teach you right now is this. As an old yogi, I try to teach my seekers, my students, this lesson. Certain people are not worth your trouble, especially if they are going to be troublesome to you throughout the rest of your time of knowing them. Why bother? So sometimes trouble is not best fought or wrestled with. Sometimes trouble is best to be ignored. I ignored troublesome people. I'm kind to them, They say hello, I say hello. They want to start a conversation. I say, I have to go. I don't say why I have to go, but I have to go because I don't want to go through the trouble of having to deal with their noise and their negative energy for the rest of a 10-minute conversation. So I'm being honest. I have to go. So this is what is meant by silent communication. According to tradition, Dakshinamurti imparted the highest knowledge to his disciples without uttering a word. His silence itself was the teaching. Śaṅkara, in his hymns and commentaries, venerates this mode of communication as the purest form. The purest form of what? The purest form of yoga teaching is silence. Well, you're not getting that from me, are you? But then again, I am not the great silent guru. I'm not a guru at all. I'm a yogi. I'm not a swami. I'm none of these things. I'm a philosopher and a teacher and a narrator and a writer. I'm an author. Primarily, I'm a teacher. Even today, the tradition of silent transmission, being in the presence of a realized teacher, remains vital in many yogic schools. Here, the silent voice is not conceptual, but essential, communicating a state of being rather than information. Well, there's an old saying, you've heard this, possibly not. I don't know what the modern generations have heard. I know what I heard growing up. There's a lot of the classical information being passed on. Sometimes you can communicate without saying anything. As I said, my father used to do that. It's conceptual. It's not conceptual. But a realized teacher is someone that has gone past that step of neti so many times they've negated most of the negative aspects of non-yoga wisdom and practice out of their lifestyles. That's what a realized teacher is. They have realized the truth of yoga, and they maintain a level of existence where they're not bothered by worldly troubles. That's why they can say to someone, I don't really have time to talk to you right now. And they can ignore them. That's better than fisticuffs or calling someone out or, all this shooting that's going on because you disagree with people nowadays. It's just terrible. Innocent people and some people that perhaps, and I'm not saying it's true, but perhaps their karma dictated it. The paradox of the silent voice. The phrase silence voice is itself paradoxical. How can silence be a voice? How can the unspoken be communicated? The Yogic tradition resolves this through the concept of non-dual awareness. As Śaṅkara writes, the knower, the known, and the knowledge are one of the highest realizations. So you have to be a knower, and you have to know the known, and you have to have the higher knowledge to reach the level of being a realized master. In this unity, the voice of silence is the self-recognition itself. You might want to rewind some of these, take note, look them up in Yogipedia, look them up in Wikipedia, so you'll have a deeper understanding of what I'm saying. This is not a starter class. This is a postgraduate class, easily a postgraduate class. One of my reflections I wrote about is the silent voice is called to the deepest possible listening, not for content, but for presence. Here we can come home to find ourselves as if we never have departed. You might want to listen to that again. I'll repeat it in case you don't want to rewind it. The silent voice is a call to the deepest possible listening, not for content, but for presence. Here we come home to find ourselves as if we never have departed. In other words, when you find yourself, you'll say, oh, who would have thought it was this easy all alone? I was always me, and I was always myself, and I was always in tune, and I was always knowledgeable, and I was always in the presence, and I was always worthy of being realized. I realized that I am the realization. Or the realization is me. And I was looking for something that I always had. It's like the story the hero story. He leaves home, goes out and has a great adventure, then he comes back home and everyone recognizes him as a hero. But how does he recognize himself once he comes back home after going through the great tasks? Does he see himself as the hero? Or does he just come back and say, hell, I knew all that all along that I could do it, but I had to do it. And that's a matter of historical fact. So conclusion, thank goodness we're at that. Abiding in the silent voice. To dwell in the silent voice is not a retreat from the world, but to encounter its essence. What's this essence I keep talking about? Well, if you make a complicated, let's make it a meal, a complicated supper or dinner, formal dinner, well, the essence of that meal should be sophistication. It should be because you're having a party of people that dress to come over and they're going to want to enjoy a sort of a chef-style, chef-level meal with not common ingredients, but with wonderful taste and presented in a great manner, and the table is set properly, and the lighting is right, and the music is right, and the ambiance and the visitation and the non-argumentative style of the evening's conversation flows. That's the essence of a fine meal with friends. So that's what essence means. You can apply it to anything you want to, but remember, it's the core, it's the essence. As the Yoga Vasistha reminds us, that's Yoga Vasistha, V-A-H, Sistha, reminds us, in the silence of the heart, the universe is heard. The silence voice, then, is the ultimate teaching, the subtlest music, and the highest realization. I point out earlier, or have pointed out, toward the realization available to all, that beneath the noise and tumult of mind and world, there's a living silence, a ground of being, a voice that calls not with sound, but with presence. Well, presence and essence, again, just rewind and listen, and perhaps you, depending on your level of comprehension and ability to absorb this data, you should become informed. The silence voice, then, is the ultimate teaching, the subtlest music, and the highest realization, an invitation to abide in the fullness of one's own being. And there ends the lesson. There ends the discourse. And that was pretty simple, I hope. And I hope I didn't bore you too much with it. Regardless, it is ended. And I'm happy with it. Hope you are. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, that's okay too. And I generally end these discourses by saying the same basic words. And here they are. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. To your friends, your family, and even strangers. And pass that style of living and acting on to each other. And who knows, in 5 or 10 years from now, we may all wake up in a world where once again we're all civil and we're not being distracted by the negative karma being produced by despots and narcissists and political leaders that are under the thumb of someone that's basically politically blackmailing them. Yes, I say these things, and I believe them, or I wouldn't be saying them. But I want to get back to that world that I grew up in where politics it wasn't pure, but it wasn't what it's turned in today. Where neighbor is against neighbor because of red against blue and state against state and county against county and PTA members against teachers and whatever else is going on out there. It's a form of madness. But when you get into situation like Hitler got Germany into in World War II, and I will equate it to a minor degree. That's what's happening here. There's a form of fascism on the rise. When you get to that state, then, of course, the theory of fascism is divide and conquer, make the population dislike each other for whatever reason. Well, the reason is they're being brainwashed. So when we get back to it not being that way any longer, and that will come, I have great hope for that. Not hope, but understanding that it will happen. All things in history happen in cycles. So when it comes back, we'll all look at each other and say, gosh, isn't it wonderful? We're back to where we used to be. It's not perfect, but it sure as hell a lot better than it was during those trying times. So again, if you enjoyed this, thank you. And I really have been getting into politics a little more lately because of the economic problems that this type of political activity is bringing on the average taxpayer in America. I mean, you work and you work and work, and then they raise your taxes, and then they give tax breaks to multi-billionaires. What kind of justice is that? Not the kind I want to live in and endure. I want it to go back to where it's fair for all. Okay, well, there it is, an old man giving his opinion. They may drag me off to the gulag one of these days, but so be that. Again, I believe in the soul being eternal. They can only do so much to my body. Well, good night to you, and thanks for listening, and I'll see you in my next discourse.